Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I'm Lolly Villanueva, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this discussion today. I want to begin by thanking all of you for taking your valuable time to spend with us. It's a significant opportunity to connect with you in this forum, as we value celebrating International Women's Day with our strategic partners. Our theme this year is aligned with IWD globally, which is Choose to Challenge. We want to use this dialogue to share experiences and effective practices for promoting a culture that fosters gender equality. To initiate this discussion and set the context further, I would like to introduce you to your host today, Dennis Gata, the head of our financial services practice. Dennis, I'm pleased to turn over to you now.
Thank you, Lali, and hello, everybody. It's great to be here today. I'm really very honored, to be honest, to host this event on behalf of Infosys here today. In fact, over the years, I've been really looking forward to International Women's Day each year. And while, in my view, every day is Women's Day, 8th of March is special because it really helps us to reflect a bit on the progress made so far, and more importantly, talk about what more needs to be done, what more can be done to have a fair and equitable growth platform for women. So it's really, on one hand, an opportunity to celebrate women for all their significant accomplishments and strengths, as well as a call to action for the progress that needs to be done to ensure more equality. I think, I was reflecting on this, and I have been really very fortunate with the strong role women have played throughout my life. In fact, so I had a very caring mother who passed away a few years back. She was a professor. I have a sister who's a friend and a confidant. She actually is a bioinformatics scientist. I have a loving wife. She's a tax consultant who's taken a break from work recently. And I have a 6-year-old, beautiful and very chatty daughter who actually recently told me that she wants to be an astronaut when she grows up because she's reading about space. In fact, that was a hot Halloween costume as well last year. So for me, I'm really very lucky to have all the four possible, close family connections with women that a man can have. And I am just so proud of each and every one of them. And all the other friends and colleagues who really inspired me, right, over the years with the achievements and with everything that they do. So as I, think more deeply about this year's theme, Choose to Challenge, I think our collective responsibility is to really challenge the imbalance that, still exists in our society and workplace. And I myself want to choose to challenge, right, with some very specific things. Now, again, this is a true story of an incident that just happened this weekend in my house. My 9-year-old son played a chess tournament this weekend for the state. And as I was reviewing the rankings last evening, I realized that 90% or more of the players in that tournament were actually boys. In fact, I thought maybe there was a separate tournament for boys and girls, but that was not the case. So I really thought that to take some action, and I asked my 6-year-old daughter, who's just learning to play chess, that if she would be interested, her choice, but if she would be interested to play the next tournament. And she was very excited about it and immediately said yes, she would love to do that. So we got her registered for the K-1 category in the next tournament, right, which is in a few months. So my learning from this and the challenge is that, I think it's important to start very early and challenge the stereotypes as kids are growing up. Otherwise, things can get, ingrained in their mind. So that's one thing that I'm going to do. I think the second challenge I want to take up is, to really celebrate more and more of women's achievements as it inspires many others. We've had some great examples last year. Women CEOs in banking, in healthcare, in so many other industries, leaders in government, champions in sports, and so on. And I think these success stories need to be really celebrated and amplified to inspire even more women. So I think these are at least two challenges that I want to take to start early with kids and challenge the stereotypes, as well as to celebrate more of the successes of women leaders in industry and society. So I'm really excited and looking forward to this discussion today. We have a great panel of strong women leaders. Thank you all again for joining us. I look forward to hearing about their experiences, their views on the Choose to Challenge theme. And I really hope that at the end of this session, we all come up with a couple of ideas that we personally choose to challenge on this very important theme. With that, I would like to call upon Martha King to moderate this session along with the panelists. So over to you, Martha, and if the host can get all the panelists on stage, please. Thank you.
Well, welcome everyone. For those of you I don't know, my name is Martha King. Dennis, thank you for a great opening, and thank you actually for sharing so many personal insights, because I really do believe progress as it relates to diversity, progress for women in the workplace, really is a personal thing. And I think for many of us, as we reflect on what it's meant for us so far in our careers, oftentimes we do think about the strong women in our lives, be they our grandparents, parents, siblings, or others. So really appreciate it. What I'd like to do is, I think I would never do justice to introducing this amazing group of panelists. So I actually will ask each one of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with some questions. Sigal, I'm actually going to ask you to get us started with that introduction, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this esteemed panel. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Sigal Zami. I'm originally from Israel. I've been living in the US for over 30 years, and I've had a long career in technology, operations, and process improvement. My current role is the International CIO and Head of Transformation for Morgan Stanley. And I've been driving a lot of our technology transformation over the last couple of years. And now in my international CIO job, I'm also looking after our global workforce across our global in-house centers, and also our core locations outside of the US. Again, pleasure being here with wonderful colleagues that some of them I've known for a long time.
Thank you so much, Sigal. Vidya, would you mind going next?
Hi, happy to be here. My name is Vidya Sundaram, and I lead the group benefits technology for the Hartford, which is an insurance provider. Have about 20 plus years in technology, started as a developer. I grew up in India, so my background is engineering, and I sort of meandered my way into technology. But clearly I loved it because I've stayed in it for 20 plus years now. Very happy to be here and look forward to the chat.
Thank you so much, Vidya. Hope, would you be so kind as to go next?
Sure. I'm Hope Butterback, and similar to Sigal, I got quite a bit of technology experience and background in my career. I've been honored to work for some really strong and great companies, whether it's GE or Webster, but right now I'm the CIO for Liberty Bank, and have been growing my banking expertise over the last several years as well. And right now we're creating a new IT strategy, which is really exciting, and looking at all different types of opportunities that we can bring to the bank when it comes to helping them meet their goals. So I'm honored to be here and really excited to hear from all of my colleagues and hearing some great questions.
Thank you, Hope. Layla, would you go next, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Layla Pourhashemi. Since everyone's talked about where they're from, I'm originally from Iran, and I also lived for a long time in London in England. And then I came to the US to go to college, and I stayed. And I also started out as a software engineer. then made my way, interestingly, into a hardware company. And so I spent the first half of my career developing and building almost everything that's currently in the data center, or what we now call the cloud. Back then, we called it a black box, and you could plug it into any power supply in the parking lot, and that was sort of your cloud. I worked for a company called Sun Microsystems for the first half of my career. Since then, I've really spent a lot of time helping transform companies. I'm on my fourth transformation now here at Blackhawk Network, where I essentially speed up the agility, effectiveness, and efficiency of our organization. I also serve as the CIO, so I have a global role in that sense. And one of my pleasures has actually been starting a strategic development center in Bangalore. So that's also been a great learning experience. I'm very excited to be here with this amazing panel and looking forward to the discussion ahead.
Layla, thank you. Actually, this is the first time meeting. I have one of the very strong women in my life who made such an important impression on me very early on was my grandmother, who taught in Iran from 1965 till into the 70s. And she had very fond memories of her time in the country. She's since passed, but anyway, it's a real pleasure, and I look forward to engaging on the panel. And that leaves, last but not least, Lauren Valente, my former colleague from Vanguard. Lauren, would you make some introductions now?
Thank you, Martha. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Valente. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer at Vanguard. I have over 17 years at Vanguard, experiences in IT. I'm seeing a theme here. I also started I had experience as a software engineer as well as some of the other panelists, so we share that in common. Experiences in IT, in the retail client service space, risk management, operations, a little bit of contact centers, 401k digital experience, so a wide range there. And just currently, I joined HR actually last summer. And a fun fact, Martha King is my former boss. So, as we think about International Women's Day and celebrating people, she's definitely had an impact on my personal career. So great to be here today with all the panelists. Thank you.
Lauren, thank you. It's great to be on a panel with you. It's a lot of fun. Well, ladies, let's get started. I'm going to put a question out to all of the panelists and invite each of you to comment if you see fit. And pardon the background noise. I hope it's not too distracting. In any event, in honor of International Women's Day, which is a day to celebrate the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women, I'd actually like to ask each of you to honor one woman who inspired you. Who would you like to celebrate today and why? And it might be hard to just pick one person, but if you would do so, that would be great. And I'll let first person jump.
I'm happy to jump in, Martha. This is Lauren here. So I'm going to go old school with the person I will celebrate. If I reflect over the last year, the social injustice that we have experienced, particularly in the U.S., over this last year really opened my eyes in a different way than previously. It's a shame that it took that, but to the long history of it and how far we still have to go. So today, I honor Harriet Tubman, very famous woman who fought against unfair treatment of blacks as slaves back in the 1800s. Many probably know about Harriet Tubman, but she escaped slavery. She led missions in secrecy at night to rescue others. And I just can't imagine how she did that, what leadership, bravery, and all of that it took. She also, in the U.S. Civil War, guided a raid that freed more than 700 enslaved people. So again, just tremendous impact. She was active also in the women's suffrage movement. So if we think about both on the social injustice side, but then in the, for International Women's Day, she had some impact there as well. So her bravery and courage continue to inspire me, and that's why I've selected her for today. I'll hand it over to whomever wants to share next.
And Lauren, that's inspirational. And for those who are anywhere in the Northeast, the Harriet Tubman story may even ring even more true in that much of that took place actually not far from where Vanguard is located today in Malvern, Pennsylvania. So thank you for sharing that. Can I invite somebody else to go?
Martha, this is Sophie. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Hope.
So I kind of took a similar type of approach that Lauren did when it comes to really thinking of who inspired me. While I have definitely some great examples throughout my career and my personal life, I did go through the thought process of someone like Michelle Obama. So I actually read her biography and really have been inspired when it comes to how she handles herself, all of the challenges that she has gone through when it comes to her own personal journey. But as you all know, she had to overcome a lot of diversity type of challenges throughout not just her career, but when she became First Lady as well. And I just love the way she handles herself, the class that she kind of brings to a whole new level when it comes to being able to face those challenges, and her focus on helping children. So she really used her voice when she was the First Lady and being able to really inspire some really great different types of organizations, along with some of the push that she had when it comes to being able to give some of that visibility. So I have the highest respect for her, and really kind of took some lessons from her when it comes to how she handles herself.
Hope, thank you for sharing that. I think, Vidya, you might have been ready to go next.
So I picked Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's very inspirational to me. As to my daughter, who is a 15-year-old, she talks about her all the time too, because she was a pioneer. She was in a field where there were no women in that field, not many at least, and she didn't let that stop her. I think what is really important, she went to Harvard Law School, and she interned with a law firm, and she has written in her autobiography, in her memoirs, that she did so well that she almost expected they would extend a job to her. But the industry was so male dominated at that point that she didn't get that offer. A lot of rejection, and I think there is something to be learned from that kind of resilience. To every girl that goes into a different STEM career or something and finds herself in one or two among the whole slew of boys, I think that resilience and courage is so important to have.
Thank you, Vidya. I've just started reading her book, so very excited to get into the details of it. She is truly inspirational. Let's see, Layla, would you mind, Layla or Sigal, whoever wants to go next?
Sure, I'm happy to. Interestingly, Martha, you and I didn't speak about this, and Dennis and I didn't speak about this, but I chose one of my grandmothers as somebody that actually they've both inspired me in different ways. But the one I was going to speak about was an educator. So who knows? She might have interfaced with your mother, but she was married very early. She had my father when she was 16. This is back in the 30s. And she was the first woman to go to law school and graduate law school in Iran. She was widowed at age 33 with 3 children. Her husband, who'd been the attorney general, had actually told her, kind of like what Dennis said, "You're smarter than me, you should go to law school too," because he'd been to law school, right? When you think about somebody back in those days in the Middle East, that was, talk about challenging things. That was definitely challenging the status quo. She went on to be the first woman member in parliament. She went on to live a very long life after the revolution in Iran as well. It took 3 bouts of completely different cancers to get her. And, there's really 3 words, and Vidya actually just mentioned one of those words. I'd written down 3 words that I take away from her life. Resilience is definitely one, and Vidya just pointed that out as well. The second one is integrity, always leading with integrity and doing the right thing, even when it's very hard to do so. And lastly, conviction. I think you have to have conviction about your purpose, about your mission, about what you're doing. And then you're sort of invincible, right? And that's really what it took in that day and age to do what she did. And I think, unfortunately, it is still what it takes, even in this day and age, for us to do what we need to do. And while a lot has changed, not enough has changed. And that's why we have to continue to challenge everything and go push for what we believe in and take what's ours.
Layla, thank you for that inspirational story. Thanks you for sharing about your grandmother. Sigal, let's end with you on this particular question, and then we'll move to the next.
Yeah, it's very hard to pick one woman, like you said. It's great to look up to them and get strength from them. So, I was going to say my grandmother as well. But since Lila took that, and, I will go with someone else that actually I get inspiration from every time I talk to this woman, because I think she's really embodied the International Women's Day pledge for this year, choose to challenge. She is choosing to challenge. So I'm honoring Beverly Emers, who is my mentee through a women's organization that I belong to. And she had to deal with being homeless, being on drugs, and get out of that situation, go to school, finish her degree, and really navigate through those challenges and come out stronger on the other side. And I would like to really honor Beverly and so many other women like her that are going through so many challenges and adversity throughout their life and are able to pick themselves up every day, think positive, and build a better future for themselves and their families.
Sigal, thank you, and I love that you're honoring your mentee, and I'm sure we'll get into a deeper discussion as we move on about the importance of mentorship, whether we've been beneficiaries of mentorship or whether we find that it's something that's been important that we've done for others, probably both. Guys, I'm going to move to what actually was the second question, but for our audience, let me just share with this incredible noise right outside my window. I'm going to go on mute for one moment. All right, hopefully that's all over. It's a great list you guys have put together for our audience, and not only is the list of people impressive, but this panel is impressive. And you've each achieved great professional success. I would love for you to share some bits about your own leadership journeys, if you would. And I'll let you choose to take that in whatever direction you'd like. And at the risk of asking everyone to speak, who would like to go first? Layla, could I impose upon you
Sure,
to share more about your leadership journey?
We're all being polite, so somebody needs to start, right? My leadership journey has sort of been interesting. There was a pivotal moment where things changed, so I'll just sort of describe the before and the after. I think, growing up, going to school, getting my first job, things like that, it was very much, I was in software engineering, as we talked about. I viewed it as a meritocracy now when I look back. And so, you worked hard, you did well, you moved on, you moved up, you got bigger roles, that kind of thing. And that continued. That continued for about maybe 15 years or so. And I think the pivotal moment for me, and because of the way I'd grown up, I had never felt a lack of confidence or a lack of ability to deal with a situation, or being intimidated to speak up when I was the only woman in the room. Those things were okay for me. And so I thought I'd never been affected by the bias, conscious or unconscious. And so, that's for folks who were shy and had difficulty sort of, doing the things that came a little bit more easily to me. But there was a moment I spent some time at PayPal and eBay, and it was one company back then, and they decided to invest in an internal women's conference. And I remember I went with a couple of my female colleagues, and was like, oh, well, this will be, kind of a boring couple of days because, we haven't really been affected by this. But, it'll be good to hear what other people go through, right? And this changed my life. They had some really impressive women up there. They had there's a whole institute at Stanford that researches bias and gender bias and unconscious, conscious, etc. And what I learned was how affected I had been. And you sort of replay your career and you go back to those moments and realize, wow, that's why that happened. But in the moment, I'd actually never realized. And so once I realized that, and there was a number of techniques that they taught us at that conference, and they had that conference every year, and it started with only being 200 women. By the fourth year it was held, there were 500 women in those leadership positions that were invited to the conference. That itself was starting to change the picture. But just arming us with ways to recognize things and to address them, which we can talk about later, sponsoring women, I find that to be even more important as they move on in their careers than only men. And I would say that, I wish that had happened to me earlier, but I'm really glad that I was able to be part of such an event and to really change the trajectory for me and as many people as I can help based on those learnings.
Layla, thank you for that. I think many of us might be able to relate a bit to what you've just described, but it's not my job to be doing the sharing this morning. It's actually our panelists. So who would like to go next?
I can go next. I think I would say that I was fortunate enough to work for General Electric for a very long time, almost 18 years with GE. And while I was there, I got the opportunity to participate in many, many leadership development classes. And I think that really shaped the leader that I am today. One of the things that GE was really focusing on is continuous improvement and continuous learning and development. And I was so impressed with the opportunities that we were getting, everybody, not just women, but men as well, and in all kind of different functions on the front end and the back end. If you're in support function or you are in sales and marketing or client facing, we all got the opportunities to participate in leadership development classes. And I think that really shaped who I am today, someone who is focusing a lot on the values of the companies, the culture of the company, making sure that we focus on hiring A players and think about meritocracy and execution as a way of measuring really success and not focusing on might be biases. So I have to say I give a lot of the credit to GE, which trained me to be the leader that I am today.
Thanks, Sigal.
Yeah, I'll echo what Sigal said. I've had the privilege of having the same type of experiences, knowing that we were in the same company. And I felt honored to be able to have those opportunities. GE is very much a proponent of recognizing talent, growing the talent, and making sure that we bring that forward, right? And recognizing the talent of the next generation. And I think we still have more to do as a culture and an organization, but I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. One of the things that I do remember specifically in my career is the moment that I was told that I was going to get promoted. And it was basically from a senior leader who basically took a chance on me. I was pretty young in my career, but I was doing very well from an execution standpoint, and I still had a lot to learn. But he really did take a great chance on me and was a very large supporter of continuing to give women the opportunities from a leadership perspective. So I remember that a lot when it comes to developing my own talent and being able to recognize the potential in that talent and being able to give them similar opportunities when they're ready. So I'm very honored to have been able to experience that as well.
Hope, hearing you mention that just reminds me of something we would call at Vanguard stretch assignments, right? And I think some of the most transformative experiences for men or women in their careers at Vanguard were when somebody took a chance on you and gave you a job that was a little bit bigger than maybe made perfect sense at the time. Mm-hmm. But and you had support, but you still had to do it. And those stretch assignments were transformative in terms of, I think, how others could see us, but then also how we could see ourselves. And not to say that this is a group of panelists who are lacking in self-confidence, but nonetheless, it's inspiring, and we can inspire ourselves when we have someone in our corner in that way, particularly early on in our careers. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Martha, one quick thing I'll just add to that comment too. I think I certainly benefited from stretch assignments at times. I also think reflecting and hearing us talk through this, something I realized is early on, I remember even being in elementary grade school and my mother always pushing me, like, raise your hand. If there's an opportunity to read the poem or get in front of the room, like, raise your hand, raise your hand. My mother was very quiet, so I think she was always just pushing. But what that led to is when I got to the work environment, right, and I was in IT at the time, I was a software developer, and we would have minimal opportunities, but every now and then we'd be presenting our work to the business. And the team would always say, who wants to do it? And I would raise my hand, right? Or maybe I wouldn't. And after I raised my hand twice, they would say, Lauren, you do it again. You did okay last time. So I would just encourage people, like, sometimes the stretch opportunities find you because someone spotted you, right? Or saw you or believes in you. But to get spotted or to be seen, like, you have to raise your hand. And I think a lot of times it'll be outside of what you're working on. You might see a small opportunity. And I just always encourage you, like, raise your hand. Those things can lead and unlock doors in ways that you don't realize. And I didn't realize at the time, but reflecting back, I can see it.
I love that you say that, Lauren, because stretch opportunity never found me. People were talking about, somebody's going to reach out and take you along with them. And it never happened to me. I always had to work hard and say, here is what I want, and this is what I'm looking for, and raise my hand. So, it depends. It doesn't happen to everybody.
It's a great reminder. Vidya?
For my leadership, a lot of things have been said here about the relevance and importance of sponsorship and stretch roles. The one thing I would also say is different type of roles have the courage to test out and take different types of roles. I can speak from my own experience where my first 12, 13 years of my career were in consulting, right, in technology. I started in India with a large firm similar to Infosys and learned a lot, right, by being in consulting. However, there was a point in my life where regardless of how, everything that you read about women and roles, and I was faced with the choice of my personal need or for being more hands-on as a mother. And I decided that I want to switch over out of consulting into a career side role. And it was the scariest decision of my life because I felt I was doing really well in my career. I had no other need for change, but it was a little bit of an experiment. And I also took a role that was outside of IT for the first and only time in my life. That role lasted for 3 years, but I can say that it taught me so much about influencing. It taught me so much about, just a different, that out of execution, but a very different world, which was invaluable for me in my leadership growth. So I look back and say at that point in time, I was really questioning myself, but it was because it was not what I was used to doing, but the value from that was tremendous.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so important for people who are listening to hear that and internalize that. Getting out of our comfort zones, it will look different for each of us, but having the courage to do that can be transformative. Guys, I'm going to jump in a minute to a question about mentorship because it's already come up a fair bit. But before I do that, I just want to spend a minute. I suspect the audience today is appreciative of the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, but if not, it's just worth spending a minute on that. Where as a mentor, we have a one-to-one relationship with an individual, and time is set aside to be there to give them counsel, to hear what they're encountering in their life, whether it's outside of work or at work, and trying to give them helpful guidance. And mentorship relationships, of course, can last for a finite period, or they can be, career spanning. Now, sponsorship is a bit different, and to me, and someone mentioned this earlier, sponsorship can be just as impactful. And as I think about it during my time at Vanguard, sponsorship was where I was assigned to specific people in the organization, and it was my job to be aware of how be their advocate. If there were a job opportunity being discussed at the senior executive team table, and I thought, somebody that I was sponsoring would be a good candidate, it would be my job to be able to speak up on their behalf and have a consideration of them that might not otherwise be the case. And you guys may have a slightly different take on sponsorship versus mentorship, but I want to leave that there and invite comment. And if there isn't specific comment on that, I'd love for you all to talk about how mentorship has made a difference for you, whether it's in your role as mentee or mentor.
Martha, I'm happy to jump in. I agree with you on the difference there, mentorship and sponsorship. And a few things I would just share. One, I think mentors in my career have played a really important role coaching when I've had either difficult or really challenging aspects of my career. Certainly on leadership, they've done guidance there. But I actually think the most effective sessions that I have too with my mentees are when the mentee actually brings like a really challenging, tangible thing that they're working on. And we roll up the sleeves and literally work through it in the session. Those have been really impactful mentor or mentee sessions for me throughout my career. And then I will say the sponsor side, I actually think that has made a massive difference in my own career. So having really strong sponsors, I still remember a conversation, this was probably a decade ago at this point, the current CIO, I was, much more junior in my career, actually asked me to meet with him for a half hour in our cafeteria to know I'm a sponsor of your career. And he said, I don't know if you were aware of that. And I said, no, of course not. I mean, I presented to him a couple of times, but it made a really big difference for me. I was like, wow, someone that senior that I didn't even know knew about me is actually sponsoring and advocating for me. And so two things I would say there is one, it is really important to know and to find out if you have sponsors and, work through that. But then two, if you're sponsoring someone, I actually think it's important to let the person know. It made a really big difference for me. And then I realized that I could actually go to him on certain things. Whereas before I probably would have thought, my gosh, I would never take his time on wasting his time. So just two things I would share there.
That's great. That's great perspective. And I think that might surprise some people in the audience, Lauren, given how successful you are, right? But it's just a reminder that we all start our careers somewhere and we're not senior from the start. And for you, how sponsorship directly impacted you.
Yeah, I'd like to build on Lauren's point. I think, you can find your own mentor. A sponsor sort of finds you. That's the difference. It's really hard to say, I'm going to go get a sponsor today. That's very difficult. They sort of have to spot you and then open doors for you, I think, as you pointed out. And look, I've benefited from both sides of the mentor relationship. I've always had a handful of mentors and some for, 20 plus years. I also always mentor 10 to 12 people, and depending on the organization I'm in, it just works out. It sort of happens. People ask to meet with me, and then I say, should we do this once a month? And it just sort of kind of grows from there. And what's really interesting with that is I think the people I mentor don't usually realize this. The different parts of the organization and the different challenges that people are facing, and kind of help be a sounding board. I often think that the executive truth and the ground truth are very important to keep aligned. And when you have not spent time at the individual contributor level anymore in your organization, you can get really distant from it. And so as I have mentees that are individual contributors, it helps keep me grounded and connected to what the ground truth is. And at the end of the day, the ground truth wins. And so I love that. Sponsorship. I'd say the first sponsor that I remember asked me to do some totally crazy thing, and I said no. And he says, well, I don't think you meant that. Go home, think about it, come back tomorrow, right? And if I tell you what a crazy thing was, I was working at a toy company, and I was doing a job I knew how to do. Leapfrog, an educational gaming company, but really a toy company. And I was doing what I knew how to do: product development, program management, business operations, those types of things. I knew how to do that job. He asked me to essentially select and be responsible for what came out of 17 factories in China. And I literally laughed at him and said that was crazy and he needed to find somebody else. He's like, no, I don't think you understand. I need you to do this and you need to go home and think about it. And I was like, what do you mean? It's my choice. I don't want to do that, right? But this was the point about kind of taking an assignment that Vidya brought up outside of your sort of normal path and how it can change things for you. So I did that actually. And the biggest takeaway from that was that I could learn how to do a job and surround myself with people that had the subject matter expertise, and sort of bring it together where I was not, and never would be, frankly, the subject matter expert of inspecting a factory in China, making sure the fire hydrants had been, refilled at the right time and all this kind of crazy stuff. But learning how to do that essentially gave me the ability to say, I can take any job that I've never done before. And that opened a bunch of other roles later that were more related for things that I wanted to do. But my ability to say, yes, you're right, I haven't done that before, but let me tell you about a time when I took on something I knew nothing about, right? And this is what that sponsor did for me and opened that door that has continued to pay off over time. I'll probably never run another Chinese factory again, but the fact that I can say I did that just sort of puts some light in your step and causes people to pause and say, oh, well, that's a lot further off than this other assignment is. And so, maybe that would be okay to take that risk on her. And I think it's really important that we now sponsor people in our organizations and open doors for them and kind of lift them up in that way as well. Almost more important than mentoring them at this stage in our careers here, we can open doors, as you were saying, Martha, when you're in the room and they're not, and the conversation is about, who could we have lead, something. Throwing out some names there can really change that person's life.
I love that story.
I completely agree with that. I just wanted to add one thing. I think for women in their careers, it is way more relevant, and I don't mean to say men don't need sponsors, but one of my sponsors, the way they explained it to me, made a lot of sense. There was a role that was open once, and I was a little bit like, that can be a stretch for me, and I'm not entirely sure, should I apply, should I not apply? And my sponsor was, you should take that role. And I was like, I have these things, but I don't know anything about that business. And what she told me was, you have to remember that men don't think this way. And that's a generalization. But she was pointing out to how women in general can tend to be perfectionists. And we always need to be 90 out of 100 for us to be able to think that we can do a certain role or, from a skill set perspective. And what she was telling me was, it's okay. Go ahead and try that, and you have the support, right? And I think that's what sponsorship brings, like shows you what you are capable of doing that you don't know yourself sometimes.
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing, Vidya. I think sometimes the mentors know more than we do when it comes to what, the people that you're mentoring are capable of doing. And so you have to kind of take a leap of faith a little bit that they have that perspective that you just haven't quite seen yet. And then when you do take that leap of faith or that risk, and it, to Leela's point, it really can give you such a huge confidence level when it comes to being able to take on some of the stretch or the unknown, or even the job that nobody else wants, right? Those are the ones that you learn the most, get tagged for it, and you're asked to do it because they know that you'll learn from it and that you'll do well at it. It really can teach you a lot.
Oh, thank you. We've talked about confidence, we've talked about resiliency, and there are different points along the way where we're challenged, and it might have been early in a career, it might have been later in a career, but I just love to have the panelists share what do you do when you need to sort of give a boost to your own confidence, your sense of, I can do this. Who do you turn? Do you turn to your mentors? How do you navigate those moments? Because we all have them. Even if we are imbued for the most part day to day with a reasonable amount of confidence, there can be moments where we feel that sagging.
I'll go first. I think, to me, I'm very lucky to have a supporting family, and I usually turn to my husband for that boost of confidence. I think he sees things different than I do because he's not in the day-to-day and he's not in all the details and doesn't have a subjective opinion. He can step outside of what I'm challenged with and be objective. And he's always been such a huge support for me, and always remind me when I'm at a point where I need this lift me up energy. He always will remind me. Other times in our long history together, we are going to be married 34 years this coming August, that I've went through some of those challenges. And I think having someone in your life that you can lean on, that kind of give you that boost of energy is wonderful. One thing that I wanted to add on the sponsor mentor is that don't think that this is just only early on in your career. I think you need those sponsors and mentors throughout all of your careers, even when you think that you've made it to your wildest dreams and career aspirations. You still need this either formal or informal network of people that you can reach out and ask for advice when you're at a crossroad. Someone that you can reach out and ask for their opinion when there is a problem at work. And I think it's always good to have a very wide network of either sponsors or mentors that can give you their point of view on different topics, because sometimes it might be a specific problem at work and you want to reach out to someone internally that understands the dynamic, or sometimes it is like you say, I'm low down and now and I'm not sure why. And especially the last year with the pandemic, I've had a lot of moments where people reach out to me really with some personal issues and really looking out for the boost of energy and from internally and externally, right? So always keep your network going, even if you moved on and you're not at the same company anymore. Your sponsor from past life can still be a good guidance and coach in your current role as well.
Sigal, I couldn't agree more. And it just so happens that I had a good catch-up session. There was no particular reason for it, but a really great catch-up session with a longtime mentor of mine. And I did that a week and a half ago. And there was something really grounding in talking to somebody for an hour who really knows me so well, for better and for worse, knows my strong points and my weak points. Sometimes, maybe it's not true for all of us, but sometimes we all are so busy that the thing that can fall by the wayside is the investment in time in those outreaches and those conversations. But they couldn't be more important as sort of an ongoing thing that we invest in, and we should see it as investments in ourselves. Every one of us, whether we're just getting started in our careers or whether we are decades in, make sure you're making that investment. I had that little reminder about the importance of that with that conversation that I had a week and a half ago. So, thank you.
Martha, I can share real quick. Sigal, I was laughing because I thought, does she have a window into my house? As you were talking about your husband with the support, I literally think we had that type of a dialogue about a month ago. So I think I shared, I moved into the CHRO role in the summer. So it was at the end of July. And, it's a much bigger responsibility for me. And I certainly have moments where I have rocks in my rocks my confidence at times where I'm like, my gosh, can I do this role type of a thing? And I've had the dialogue where my husband will say, okay, let's reflect. How many times have you been in this position over your 17 years at Vanguard? And how many times have you worked your way through it? So I'm with you there. I think having a good support, whether it's a husband, partner, whomever, like having that, I think is really important. The other quick example I would share that I think really helps, and as a leader, for me, it has changed my behavior. So probably 2009, I had been put into a different role. I switched from the IT to the business side, which at Vanguard, it's a really big jump. It's like, oh my goodness, you left IT, And so I had moved into that role, and it was with a senior leadership team. I was a junior person supporting that team. And I remember the very first meeting I went into, and I was like, oh my gosh, how will I ever add value in this? I was coding Java yesterday. Now I'm talking about retail strategy. You know what I mean? And something that came up in that meeting, I was like, oh, I do have something to add. I was a more junior person. And so I spoke up. And after the meeting, it was a very quick note. The most senior person in the room just sent me, it was literally like 2 sentences. It just said, Great job jumping in. It would have been easy to sit on the sidelines. That's all it said. I remember that to this day. It was 2009. And what that meant to me in that moment, and said, that's right, like, get in there. And so I would just say, for anyone that's listening that's a leader, and even if you're not, if you're a peer or a colleague for someone, 2 lines is sometimes all it takes to give someone that little boost of confidence that then sets them up, whether it's a new job or for the week or whatever it is. So I just encourage, it has changed my behavior, and I sort of remind myself to do that for other people.
I love it. It's not just what we do to restore or build up our own confidence, but what we can be doing for others, Lauren, to your point, to help bolster their confidence. Great point. Anything else anyone wants to jump in on regarding confidence and resilience? I have other topics, I think, as you know, which we can jump to.
Well, I'll just add, the keeping mentors and sort of sponsors from times past and kind of moving on. I definitely subscribe to that. And something I've started to do in the last few years is think about it more as my personal board of directors. And the reason that was helpful to me is when you think about companies assembling board of directors, they bring people with different facets of experience in order to sort of build that joint sort of point of view. Not every member of a board knows everything, right? But they each come with a specific. So I sort of have various people that have mentored or sponsored me over time that have different aspects. For example, one woman is an HR leader, right? So when I'm dealing with people issues and things like that, she's the one that I will sort of seek out. There are folks on that personal board of directors who are people I've mentored, but they've known me very well, and they kind of know, hey, when I'm dealing with something with a more junior person, I'll go to that person and I'll say, hey, how would you approach this? This is a situation I'm dealing with. What would it feel like if we talked about this, and kind of role play, things like that. I have people who've been my bosses that I've sort of kept over time as I've moved to different companies by sort of subscribing them to this. And so it gives me 1 or 2 people, no matter what the topic is, that I can go to. And I think that has been exceedingly helpful to me over time. And sometimes 5-6 years will go by and I will not have talked to one of these people. But then the right moment comes, you send a text message and you get on the phone and it's like nothing changed. And that's something I love. I'd also add, during this sort of pandemic time, we're doing far less, right? We're doing far less outside. Weekends are, cleaning the house and getting ready for the work week again, right? So one of the things I've started to do is sort of give myself the gift of a 1-hour walk and chat. So I'll try to somebody finds me, or I reach out to somebody, either way, like Lauren just described. And, give yourself that little coffee, like if you're going to go have coffee with somebody, but now you're not. So just go for a walk and talk with somebody that you haven't spoken to in ages. And it just feels like a little booster you can give yourself, and takes you back in time to those relationships and helps keep us connected. It's very difficult to remain connected, I think, while we're all working from home and working remote and, on Zoom calls all day. So that's just been something I've been doing in the last year, which has actually given me more opportunities to talk to people than I did before, because if I couldn't see them, I wouldn't meet them. Now we can just have a walk and talk.
I love it. I hope everyone takes that idea away, Layla. Layla, I'm going to pivot to a discussion about unconscious bias. And I believe you had mentioned that,
yes,
that in your career early on, you did not, you had a good degree of self-confidence.
Right.
You did not feel like opportunities were withheld from you. But it was an experience you had later in your career that made you more mindful and became aware of these things called unconscious bias. I would just love for you and the other panelists to talk a bit more about the topic of unconscious bias. What are some ways you've seen that play out in the workplace? What have you done to address it? And maybe even to what degree cultural expectations reinforce stereotypes and biases. Anyway, I'll leave it at that as a thought starter. And not to put you on the spot, Layla, but since you talked about it earlier, maybe you'd carry us on.
Happy to. So whoever doesn't know this woman, you need to go find some YouTube videos about her. Her name is Professor Deb Gruenfeld. Last name is Gruenfeld. She's part of Stanford's Women's Studies program. And she's done a number of talks, the most powerful of which is actually called Women in Power. So she was the presenter at that first conference that I referenced earlier, and there were many other people. We had Hillary Clinton one year. We had all kinds of interesting luminary people, but Deb Gruenfeld was really the one that made a difference. And she told a story. Many people have probably heard it, but there was a study done way back before that. It was called the Heidi Howard story. Has anyone here heard of the Heidi Howard story? So this is about a Silicon Valley woman by the name of Heidi Rosen, a very accomplished, she's now part of a number of boards of directors and so on. She was a founder of companies and things like that. And there had been a study, I think it was part of Harvard Business School, where they wrote a case study and they changed one name, one word in the case study. In one case, it was Heidi, because it was actually about Heidi Rosen. In the other half of the case studies, they just changed Heidi's name to Howard. That's all they did. Another H name, just male, not female. And they gave this case study to a bunch of students, and they asked them a bunch of questions about the case study afterwards. Did you think this leader was effective? Were they able to accomplish their goals? The usual kinds of things. Incredible, incredible. Both men and women thought Howard was far more successful. The only difference in the case study that they read, and it was just a sheet of paper, there was no interaction, there was no video, nothing, just a piece of paper that had a case study on it. They were asked to comment on it, answer some questions. Howard was much more effective in both women's eyes and men's eyes. Like, it was just nuts. I mean, when you think about stuff like that, it's just, you just changed one name, Heidi or Howard, right? And there's many, many, many other things that she talks about. And I'll just sort of go to the punchline. I learned a number of techniques that could help remove this bias, spot it, and then sort of reduce it as much as possible. One of them is about hiring. We're probably on both sides of this now, in our careers. Early on, you're the one trying to get hired. But either way, just find a way to remove the name. You can just Sharpie out the name on a resume and just hand it around. Make sure you don't start interviewing for a position until there's a diverse slate of candidates. And make sure that the people doing the interviewing are also diverse, because we hire people that look like us, have experiences like us. So when you have a diverse slate of people doing the interviewing, there's far more opportunity that the different styles that the candidates may have can actually come through, because the interviewers will have different styles. Maybe you can find someone who respects quiet leaders, and have somebody on the panel that has, very different experiences. So that's one thing about removing the bias in the hiring. The second one was, it came up earlier about the one, putting up your hand to speak up. I think, Lauren, that was you. There's two parts to this. Having the courage to speak up is one thing. And that's where I had felt that I wasn't affected, because I always did have that courage to speak up and raise my hand, as Lauren so eloquently told us. But there's a difference between speaking up and being heard. The bias comes in not being heard. And you'll notice, because I've been doing this entire time actually, you'll notice me refer back to something somebody else said and build on their point. I try to do that almost every time I speak on a panel. I've just done it a few times here. When you do that, you go back to the power that they established and remind people of something important that person said. I pointed out Lauren, I've pointed out Vidya, I referred back to you. Back gives you power. What then that does is it starts me from where you left off in terms of power in the room. Now, we don't have that bias here because we're having this conversation in this type of a panel. But how many times are you the only woman in the room? How many times before were you the junior person in the room and nobody listened to your idea? 4 minutes later, a man said the same thing. It was like, oh my gosh, that was the most amazing thing. How come nobody ever thought about that? You'd said it 4 minutes earlier. Right? So when we recognize this, we can go back and say, well, I'm not sure we really heard Hope. Did everyone remember what Hope said earlier? And then you go back and restate it. You give that person power. And then your power starts from their power. So it just keeps building. So these are just two things. Deb Gruenfeld has a lot more of these things, but Women in Power, it's an amazing talk that she's done. And I talk about it with everybody, and I want everyone to know and use these techniques. A very simple, strange one. I was once asked, why do women always drop their chairs when they, come into a conference room? Well, the simple fact is women tend to be shorter and their feet would be, dangling, and they can't put them on the floor if they don't drop their chair. So I learned, okay, I'm only 5'4", so this is definitely a problem that I have. So you know what I learned? It doesn't matter anymore, work from home, because nobody sees your feet anyways, but put your feet on the wheels. There's always the office chairs have the little 5-spoke thing. Put your feet on that. They don't have to be on the floor. That allows you to stay like 4 inches higher up across the table, because we end up kind of looking like this, right? Because when you drop your chair and the conference room table is, it's funny, but occupying space gives power. And men do it all the time. How many times have you seen a man come into a conference room, pull a chair next to their chair, stick their bag on it, put their arm over it, right? Now they've taken up 100% more space. Things like this. These are where the biases come in. And these are very practical things we can do to help level the playing field.
Layla, I love your stories, and just thinking about what we can do to help others, just to acknowledge and empower the words that someone in the room may have spoken earlier, but for any variety of reasons, they have been glossed over. I think it's our responsibility to do that. We're not looking out for ourselves so much at this point in our careers. I would think we're really looking out much more for others and helping to pave the way for them. I love those examples. You could teach a class on unconscious bias, Layla. That was phenomenal.
I have paraphrased her, but I actually encourage people to listen to her because she's amazing and it's super practical. You can do it every day, every meeting, if you listen to some of the things she talks about.
Thank you. In a session earlier this morning, I was sharing a story from very early on in my career where I walked into a room with a prospective client who commented on my age and how young I was, and it was an older man, and I was the only woman in the room, and I was younger than everyone in the room by a wide margin. And it was one of those moments where I thought, okay, I could say nothing, but that just completely weakens me, or I need to say something, but not so much so that offends. And I remember saying, well, yes, but I hope by the end of this meeting, you're not even thinking about my age, and you're thinking about what I know about this particular topic. And it was a bit of a way to sort of put the person on notice without being unprofessional. And I really felt like at the end, I'd accomplished my objective. But sometimes we have to stand up for ourselves because there's a time when no one's there to do it for us. But increasingly, we are there to stand up for others. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to let the other panelists jump in who feel so compelled on this topic before we move to the next.
I don't think I have anything to add. I'm sorry, Vidya.
I think I have a knack now of like starting at the same time as someone else, so I mastered that in this panel. I just wanted to say that was really inspiring and educating at the same time. I really appreciate that. I will say the one thing I've also noticed, earlier on in my career especially, there was definite, I don't know if it was patronizing. It can be called mansplaining now, but people sort of assuming in the room that you don't know as much as you do. You don't have as much experience as you do. And I don't know, back then, I really realized it for what it was. I just, okay, that's annoying, but anyway, let me go on, right? But that sort of gave me the resilience, right? I wasn't faced by it at all. But I do look back and think about how much of that has happened. I'm sure that every one of you has dealt with a lot of that. People talking over, people not giving you unsolicited advice or guidance. There's so much of subtle, and I'm sure they mean it with the best intentions. That's the sad part about unconscious bias, that it's totally I mean it in this way. But would they be doing the same thing to a man with the same experience is the question that I think people have to ask themselves.
Couldn't agree more, Vidya. Thank you.
I was just going to reinforce what Leela was saying. I think a majority of the progress that we need to make is really around awareness, right? Once you're aware of something, then you can change your behavior. And I think some of the examples that she gave, that if we could, have that be a class that everyone takes at the beginning of every week, I think we could really make some great progress when it comes to people just understanding how their actions can be perceived and just having that awareness. And I think that's really key.
Thank you.
I think the unconscious bias go deeper in technology, because I do feel that there is a bias that women are not technical enough. And we've been trying really hard to put forward some really amazing technical women as role models for others, to not feel the disadvantages just because they're women and think that they're not technical enough, but really building up the technical confidence in some of the women that we have through various programs. Because, there is unconscious bias, I think, in every line of work, but in technology, there is specifically there've been multiple famous people that also stated that, right? There was this guy in Google that kind of broadcasted it to the world, and that created quite a fuss. But one of the things that needs to be done, in my opinion, is to build up the confidence of women in technology specifically.
So it's really striking. So I obviously did not spend the majority of my career in the technology industry. I spent it in investment management. And what I recall, so many times for myself and then coaching other women to do is to credentialize themselves by, when they are speaking up in the room, to be able to bring two things to that conversation. One, bring your proof points, bring your data, bring the specifics of the knowledge you have, enough so that people know you're the real deal. But then also be able to tell a convincing story around whatever that topic is. So sort of bring your proof points and your data and bring your passion in the telling of the story. And when you can do both of those things, you're more likely to be heard and taken seriously. But I think in industries where there's this deeper technical aspect, in the absence of that, women can be underestimated. Anyway, just offer that perspective from a not the technology industry, but another industry.
Yeah, I think that's great, Martha. The credentializing. I mean, I remember you actually gave me that coaching once or twice as well, and it's impactful. I've watched others do it. Two quick things I would add on the unconscious bias. I'll keep it short, but one would be around style. So I think there's a lot of bias around style, and we all have our own preferences there. That could be gender related or not, or otherwise. And one thing that I've tried to ask, even to myself, right, if I find myself getting stuck in it, is, does the style that you're speaking of, right, when you're evaluating someone's performance or considering someone for a promotion or a job, does the style that you're thinking of, does it actually make the person less effective, right? Or is it just something that you don't prefer? Is the person still effective? Think about what they had to get done. Did their style get in the way of them achieving the outcome? If the answer is no, then I really think you need to pause, and that might be a bias that you have, as opposed to an impactful style difference, right? If someone's super verbose and they never get to the point, and everybody's in the room and a half an hour later, they're like, where are we? You didn't get to the outcome. That's a little different, right? So I think thinking about that would be one. The other one I would say is not making assumptions for people. So totally different tact here, but we had someone who returned from maternity leave. She was in a new role. It was a bigger role, so it was a lot more responsibility, and she was being considered for a development program. And the group that was making the decision of the couple of seats, who would get the seats in the program, started to speculate on it. Oh, it's probably too much. She just returned. She has a big job. She has a 4-month-old baby at home and all this. And they were about to make the decision without even asking the woman, is it okay? So it's just, I would always say, like, keep your eyes peeled for that. And stop the conversation and say, let's go ask the person, right? Don't make assumptions for others. I've seen that happen a few times. And again, it's all well-intentioned, but the impact could be negative. So just two things I'd add on the bias front.
I had that same experience when I was at GE. My son was a year old, and there was an opportunity in London, and I felt like I wasn't asked about the opportunity because my son was young, and I kind of again raised my hands, and when somebody said, "Oh, might you be interested?" I said, "Yeah, I would at least like to interview for that," and I did get the role, and I did move to London, and my son was a year and a half at that time. So I'll make assumptions.
Yep, the same thing happened to me as well. While it wasn't for a new role, I was actually sharing this with my husband last night as we were preparing for this, and I shared the story of a leader early in my career that made the assumption that I wasn't going to be able to continue to go at the same pace as it was before I had my child. Right? And so when I was coming back, they started to cut back my workload. I'm like, what's going on? Why are we changing some of this, and why are you taking some of this away? And then they finally shared with me, and I'm like, guys, let's just talk about it, right? Let's have that discussion, and then maybe we can come up with whether or not that needs to happen. But I'm good. Let's keep going. And so it was unfortunate that there was some assumptions that were made when it comes to what my abilities were based on, simply just because I've, started a family, and they were making those assumptions on my behalf.
Hope, I was writing an article actually last night, and I referred to a story which was exactly what you just said. I just returned from maternity leave, and my boss, who was a male about 15 years senior to me, said, Layla, it's really odd. Your work hasn't suffered at all since you came back from maternity leave. And I was just like, there are not too many times in my life where I was completely speechless, but I was completely speechless. And all I could do, which I'm not proud of, I retorted back. I said, it's really odd. You've got 2 daughters. I haven't really noticed your work suffering either. And I was just like, I'm just going to claim my space because I'm not taking this, right? But that was, my son's now 21, so that was a long time ago. But you know what? Like, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. You just told that story. You had no idea. I just wrote about this last night, and I remembered it. And it's seriously like the back of my neck kind of gets funny when I think about that moment. Yeah. And I'm not proud of the way I sort of retorted back, but leaving it hanging there would have been worse, I think.
It raises all of these comments raise a very interesting point for me, which is, and I think we're on a journey in outcomes oriented. Are we a performance-based culture? And if that's true in a company, it doesn't matter. And of course, the pandemic has changed things. But in an outcomes-based and a performance-based culture, whether you're at the office from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. shouldn't matter, right? It's what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I feel like I've seen companies that I've observed in my roles at Vanguard, and also what I've observed at Vanguard, a real transition happening. But I think it varies by company. So actually it kind of takes me to what I think will be probably, we only have time for one more question. And that is, if you guys would be willing to share strategies that you have employed or at your companies with some success to continue driving progress on diversity. I would love to just hear some of that from each of you, maybe as our final thoughts before we go to close.
I have one thing that I would like to share, and that's reverse mentoring. We've instituted reverse mentoring, and right now it's being done to the leaders, but we are expanding that program this year because it has been very successful. And I have actually a mentor who is junior in the organization and is telling me what they see on the ground as far as unconscious bias, as far as inclusion, how do they think about belonging, what issues do they run across. And I've learned so much from that person who is diverse in the organization that I think it's been a very, very successful program for us. So I'll leave it there.
Sigal, thank you for sharing that. And I think, Layla, you might have mentioned the difference between ground truth and executive truth earlier. And reverse mentoring, Sigal, just as you've shared, really opens up an opportunity for us to be in touch with that. That's so important. Thank you for that. Others, do you have?
I would add, men are part of the journeys, the sponsorship journey, because recently we started some work around being really thoughtful about sponsorship for women in technology. And when we think about that, there's so much work to be done with the men leaders, right? Raise awareness, create a strong business case for the need for sponsorship and extend that. You need more allies in this journey, and we can't sort of make that significant progress without having men be part of that network.
Couldn't agree more. This is not just a singularly journey for women to be on. We have to be in it together, frankly, with our male colleagues. Other thoughts, guys?
I'll just add, a statement I try to make often is that diversity of thought, skills, and experiences leads to better business outcomes. And I think everything we've talked about, and I think a few of us actually mentioned this earlier, is better for everyone. It's better for everyone. It's not only better for the more junior people, it's not only better for the women, it's not only better for the shy people, it's actually better for everyone. I'm lucky where I am right now at Blackhawk Network. We have a woman CEO. She's actually the founder as well. And half our leadership team are women. And it makes a very big difference in terms of sense of belonging. I'm not the only outspoken woman around the table. There's actually a few way bigger ones, right? And so it's just normal. It's just the way it is, right? But it's also about just breaking down the silos between the different functions. Technology people not talking to business people, HR people not being brought to the table, finance just sort of counting the numbers as opposed to being part of the strategy. All of these things, bringing in those diverse thoughts, skills, and experiences leads to better outcomes. So what I've tried to do within my current company and a couple of the prior ones is just ensure we have people from every function, from every sort of part of the business in the important conversations, because everyone brings a different set of companies they've been at, a different set of experiences, and that debate is what gets you to the better outcome. So I've sort of expanded beyond just talking about it in terms of women and senior, junior, mentor, that kind of thing, to just expand the playing field to everybody. And I think that makes a big difference.
I can jump in real quick for Vanguard. So Layla mentioned these earlier, but we have a very big focus area in hiring: diverse slates, diverse panels, blind assessments. So she mentioned all three of those. We definitely have a focus there. Talent reviews, we're very specific in there to take a particular look and make sure we have both minority and gender diversity when we're doing talent reviews, because I think sometimes things get missed there. And then the last one is around pay equity. In particular, making sure that maternity leaves don't set women back in pay. Imagine a woman who has 3 children, 4 children, whatever it is, right? If each time the pay gets set back that year end, we used to prorate, we've actually changed it structurally so that doesn't happen, to keep that pay equity up for women. Because biologically, we are the ones that have to carry the children. So the way it works. A couple of examples there.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Lauren.
Just to add to that and take a little bit of a different direction, one of the things that I've experienced in some of my past organizations is really kind of starting when it comes to recruiting, right? So whether that's at the college level, even younger, right? When it comes to sponsoring events like Girls Who Can Code and being able to reinforce the STEM types of initiatives that have been out there have been really valuable when it comes to continuing to reinforce the importance of the space and why it's important for women to stick with something that they're passionate about versus kind of getting veered off to the left-hand side a little. So, we've been trying hard to kind of put a little bit of extra focus on there and figuring out how that can also benefit us from, feeding the talent into our organization as well.
That's wonderful. What great insights and ideas you all have shared, and sharing a piece of sort of your own careers. This has been just a phenomenal hour, and I want to thank all of the panelists. Ladies, I would like to continue this conversation with you, but we're now out of time, and I actually need to turn it over because we're going to go to close. So, but before I do, just one more thank you to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, really. Appreciate it, Martha. Great job and an awesome discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
We one for the pose.
Thank you.
If everybody can do that, yeah, thank you. Somebody should be taking a picture. But thank you again. Appreciate it.
Wow, what an inspiring panel. Thank you so much to Martha for leading, to Dennis for your warm introduction, and of course to Sigal, Lauren, Vidya, Layla, and Hope. As you were talking, so many things resonated with me, and I was jotting them down. And I would love to offer a brief wrap up with some of your words of wisdom. So, Layla, when we first began and you were honoring your grandma, you talked about integrity and you talked about conviction, how important it is for us to stand firm in our beliefs and consistently live by them. You all talked about how important mentors and sponsors are for women. Hope shared that we need advocates who have a seat at the table to help drive us forward and encourage us to push ourselves, to really show us what we're capable of. Sigal, you reminded us that we need mentors and sponsors and partners throughout our entire career, and that we need large networks so that we can get different points of view. Lauren, I loved this. You reminded us to stretch. You reminded us to raise our hands in order to be seen and to not sit on the sidelines. And Vidya, you inspired us to have the courage to make changes, to try new things. We must all choose to challenge, choose regularly how we are going to respond to inequalities. In Layla's words, spot it, then reduce it. We must choose to lift up other women, to celebrate each other, and to celebrate ourselves. Thank you so much to everyone who joined today, International Women's Day. Thank you to Infosys for promoting an inclusive culture and for empowering women. We would now like to invite all of you to join us backstage in the social lounge. And thank you once again for joining us.